Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today, the Southern Jewish Voices. My name is Lil McDonald, and I'm the Director of Jewish Life here at the Liber JCC. And this program was created for us to be able to tell the stories of the Jewish community here in Birmingham and to offer opportunity for building bridges within our Birmingham community and also hopefully to help create an understanding and fight anti-Semitism. We are very excited about this program today, and this is our last program for the season. I want you to save the date. We'll have more information about it, but we will kick in back again in September 18th. And all the information will be in our website. And in case you don't know that, and this is your first time, I know we have a lot of listeners online. Some people reach out to me and said they've never been here, but they're watching every single one of them online. So all the seasons are available since 2022, and we are working together to archive those stories so they will be available for generations to come. And again, thank you so much for joining us. We have a really special treat for you. We just celebrated our Israel Independence Day, and we have some halva, which is a sesame spread that you can take with you home to try. This came all the way from the Jerusalem market. So it is here for you, and hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Sleel. So just want to say, by way of introduction, this has been such a great season of Southern Jewish Voices, and thank you to those of you who've come to all of them and those who are joining for the first time. And yeah, excited for a third season next year. And I'm excited to have Adam on as my guest today. And I just want to preface by saying, when I first started at Temple Emanu-El 4 years ago, I've been working with Adam that whole time and collaborative efforts with Temple Emanu-El, and I referred to him as Rabbi Wright over and over again, and every time he told me not to do that. So I don't want anyone to think I'm being disrespectful by calling him Adam, but I know he will admonish me until I drop the formalities. So anyway, I'm very excited to have you on today as our last guest of the season, and I know we're all excited to learn more about you. So we will jump in, as we always do, by learning a little bit about your early life. Okay. So I'm hoping you can start by just, telling us a little bit about the Jewish community you grew up in, your family. We're always interested in learning about your early Jewish context, and I know for you that was in Michigan, outside of Detroit.
Thank you for having me. Margaret, by the way, has a strong Michigan connection, so I feel we have a special connection in that regard, and we'll get into the hockey stuff later because she has a very special first cousin whom I won on the Detroit Red Wings. We'll get to that towards the end. I grew up first in Southfield, Michigan. Let me back up. There's a wonderful movie called Avalon with Elijah Wood. It's about Jewish communities after World War II. So if you lived in Los Angeles, New York, Cleveland, Detroit, any of the suburbs, we used to live in apartment buildings with your family, your aunts, and your uncles and cousins. And after the war, we had the rise of Jewish suburbanization. So originally, my great-grandparents, Anna and Dave Davis, they came to Detroit. My real last name on my father's side is Ritzlatsky. He came over here to sell paint and changed his name. But they came here to have a new life, and some went through Ellis Island, and it was also common for Detroit Jews to go through Toronto. So, in a nutshell, we ended up in Detroit, and at that time, in the 1920s, the biggest manufacturing economy was the automaker, but Henry Ford, who wasn't a fan of the Jewish community, wanted to hire a lot of Jews. So Jews had to engage in blue-collar endeavors and also forms of organized crime, which will be for another class. But my great-grandfather, Dave Davis, whom all three of my kids share his middle name, Davis, he was one of the first business owners to hire Black Americans, and in the riots in the 1940s, his gas station was not burned because of his employment, and I have a picture of that. Actually, I sent it to my mom for her to have to be framed. There's a picture. And we were in Detroit. My mother and aunt were born. And after the war, they went to Southfield. Rachel and I, my sister, we too were reared in Southfield. And eventually we went to West Bloomfield, Michigan. There, we grew up at Temple Israel. That's where my mom went. The great Harold Loss is a rabbi. The great Gerald Orbach, who is one of the famous cantors of all time. Believe it or not, their membership today is just under 4,000 families.
Wow.
It is the largest congregation in North America. My mom was confirmed there when it was in Detroit, and we grew up in a really strong Yiddishkeit area. Within a square mile, there are about 10 synagogues, tons of Jewish delis. We went to a bar and bat mitzvah every Saturday, and even there were Sunday night parties, God forbid. But that was our life, and we had a Jewish world, and we sort of had a non-Jewish world, but 99.9% of all my friends were Jewish growing up.
Wow. So, I'm hoping you might unpack that term a little bit more for us, especially for some of our listeners who aren't familiar. And I'll make this a two-part question. Tell us a little bit more about what Yiddishkeit means and what you mean by that. And then also going into that, you described previously that your family was a very culturally Jewish family. It was a very culturally Jewish environment. Just talk to us a little bit more about that.
So I want to begin answering the first question by a great learning lesson for me. So I grew up in this strong Jewish community in West Bloomfield, Michigan, in Oakland County. I went to college back east. I went to graduate school at Vanderbilt. Year in Israel for rabbinical school. But then we had something called student pulpits. Maybe 40 families, these small shuls throughout America. I happen to be in Victorville, California. Has anyone ever heard of Victorville, California? Thanks, Aunt Beth. Okay. Victorville, California is on the 15. It's a great stop when you want to go to Vegas. It was a very interesting experience being at Victorville. I thought, regardless of the size of a congregation, Jews were Jews. And so when I went to Victorville, I had a really big learning experience. And my rabbinic advisor, Deborah Weisberg, gave me a good tochacha, good rebuke, saying, different Jewish communities, they're all unique. So therefore, I learned that Michigan Judaism is a lot different than New York Judaism and Birmingham Judaism. So, Yiddishkeit culture. We have an unbelievably strong and proud federation. We have a strong Jewish Free Loan Society, Jewish Vocational Services. Michigan was home to Bill Davidson. Has anyone ever been to the Western Wall in Israel? The Davidson Plaza, that's named after Bill Davidson, blessed memory. He owned the Detroit Pistons. So we grew up with these people. We had ambassadors to the state of Israel. So Judaism was our everything, whether it was Reform or Orthodox or conservative. There is significant community in Michigan Judaism. And right now, it's one of the embodiment of the next generation. So that's your first question. Second question?
Talk to us just a little bit more about your family. And you described, earlier to me that your family was very culturally Jewish. Just tell us a little bit more about your family's Jewish environment.
I remember my mom got me a sticker of the state of Israel. And I always thought that I was born in Israel. And she let me go on for this for about 15 years.
It's a very long time.
But it's, in addition to Shabbat, we went to Hebrew school Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays. And I was a former tennis player, All-American, all that stuff. And I had to go 3 times a week. And I said to Mom, why do I have to go 3 times a week? And her answer to me was, if it was good enough for me, it's good enough for you. So there was nothing nuanced there. So we went 3 times a week. And then after you became a bar bat mitzvah, we went to something called like Monday night school. So every Monday, my sister would drive, my best friend Danny Connor and I, and we would go and we would have a great time. We'd eat dinner and take electives, but the amount of people that went to Hebrew high school, it was our life. And that's why, it's something Rachel and I would later lament in life, but, you make a Jewish community wherever it is. And so not every city has a deli, but the Jewish community in Michigan is something special. And if you ever go to the Jewish agency in Jerusalem, the Detroit Jewish Federation always ranks top 10 for allocations and involvement throughout the world.
Wow, well, it's really great context and interesting to see such a strong Jewish background as we move into the next part of our conversation. One of the reasons we were really excited to have you on is that you're our first clergy member to be on Southern Jewish Voices, and so we'll get into talking a little bit more about that. And I'd love if you could start by just telling us a little bit about how you decided to become a rabbi, just to put it simply. And I know there was sort of a journey to get there.
So if you're a rabbi in Michigan, you have 3 honorary country club memberships of the big 3. I'm just kidding. It is 100% true, and actually turned down an assistant position, but it was expected I'd go to Franklin Country Club. But I did not want to be a rabbi. What happened was I wanted to be in the Foreign Service or the CIA, so I took Russian my freshman year, and that lasted maybe 4 classes. I think Miyan, Zavut, Adam, Ochi Horosho, and Stool. That's it. And some swear words. I took a class called Introduction to the Hebrew Bible. I thought it would be just like Sunday school. It wasn't, but the person who taught it was a professor named Rabbi Dr. Jonathan D. Brumberg-Krause. And he was the embodiment of a rabbinic professor. He's going to get mad when I say this, but it's okay. He had that professorial boich. Boich in Yiddish means belly. Often he would have coffee stains on his shirt and on his paper. Sometimes he would mix and match his shoes. But there was something about him that he opened up a door to me. So I did fine in the class, and then the following semester I wanted to take more classes with him, and his doctorate was on the Jewish aspects of the New Testament. So I said, oh, this is kind of interesting. So Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays from 9:30 until 10:20, I took literature of the New Testament. This was second semester of my freshman year, so 2001. And then after that class, there was a 10-minute break, and we would walk together. I would carry his books. And that class was Scriptures of Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And within a moment of time, our conversations about Judaism, about life, I realized I wanted to become him. And I fell in love with Judaism, not so much spiritually, that's going to be a little bit later, but more intellectually and academically. I took more and more classes with him. My honors thesis was on the rabbinic aspects of Jesus' New Testament. He went to Vanderbilt. I went to Vanderbilt. But the big split was I then did not want to get my PhD because I hated graduate students. At Vanderbilt, did you guys ever heard of Brugger's Bagels? Do they have them down here? Okay, so in Brugger's Bagels on 21st Avenue, Nashville, if you spent $100, you got unlimited coffee for the year. So all I did was drink coffee and study Greek and Hebrew. I really wasn't doing anything for the community, Jewish or non-Jewish. My hair was down to here. It was horrible. Wearing a cardigan sweater, and I realized that you're not going to change life if you're engaging in such esoteric information. So rather than directly applying for my doctorate, I decided to do an internship at Ohbe Shalom, the Temple in Nashville. And there I had a boss, and her name was Linda Gutchin. So Linda Gutchin, who happened to be at Temple Emanu-El for a couple of years as our interim director of education, she is the one who opened me up to Southern Judaism. She is the one who showed me about congregational life, and her husband, Bernie Gutchen, who saved me at our most difficult moment, was truly remarkable. So in Nashville, my second year, I was like a Reform Shomer Shabbos. I went to shul every Friday, and then we went out to dinner with my friends. And then on Saturday, I went to shul, and I did this for the entire year. And I loved every single aspect of Southern Judaism and what it meant. I remember there were Jews who were the third and the second. In Michigan, you don't do that. It's Chas L'Shalom, it's bad luck. But I was blown away. So I applied to rabbinical school. I deferred my first year. I just was really tired from Vanderbilt, which happened to be the best decision ever. And I ended up going, my first year was 2008. I went back to Los Angeles. And it's a blessing that I deferred my first year because my mom set me up with who would be my wife, Rachel, in Michigan, so who was in residency at UCLA. So if I went to rabbinical school and I didn't defer, there would be no Rachel. It's kind of crazy the way the world works out.
Yeah.
So that's how I ended up in my path.
That's great. And I have two sort of follow-up questions there. One, you mentioned sort of being opened up to Southern Judaism. Can you tell us just a little bit more about, I guess, what were the things you were being opened up to? What was different? What did you have to sort of get used to about that initial experience in Southern Judaism?
It wasn't so much liturgical or congregational services. Let's give an example, the organ. We have an organ at Temple Israel. We have an organ at Temple Emanu-El. You have an organ at Central Synagogue and Park Avenue, which is conservative, and the Temple Sinai in LA, where David Wolpe was at. So it wasn't so much the organ, but it was a different form of kindness that I wasn't used to. It was more genuine and authentic. I liked the accents. And even though they say that Nashville is the most southern Midwestern city now, there was something about it that I truly loved. I love the idea that people are proud with their religious expression. I lived behind the Methodist Vatican in Nashville. The head of the Methodist Church, Abingdon Press, was there. And data tells us that when people have faith in their lives, people are happier. So I saw a greater correlation of happiness in Nashville than other areas, especially compared to on the mean streets of Los Angeles. So it was something special to me.
Yeah. Well, I guess so. Tell us a little bit then about your time in Los Angeles, and I'm sort of winding us to Birmingham,
Okay.
So maybe you can kind of get to that transition too.
So 5 years in Los Angeles, and I love Los Angeles. There's something magical about LA that you have Jefferson, you have Adams, you have Hoover, Washington, and most Angelenos don't know they're named after former presidents. I think that's kind of funny. It's like a Bialik poem. But I had great mentors. Rachel and I had a great time. It's a great place when you don't have kids. So when I went through rabbinic placement, I traveled multiple synagogues throughout the country trying to figure out what would be the best match. In a way, it's kind of like medical residency. So it was down to the final two. One was a very large shul as an assistant rabbi at Temple Beth-El in Michigan on Telegraph Road. And the other was Temple Solel in San Diego. But when you're an assistant rabbi, it's all about the senior. And regardless of the location, you want to go to a place that you can really learn from an incredible senior rabbi. And that happened to be David Frank in Cardiff by the Sea, San Diego. He taught me how to run a service. He taught me how to write a eulogy, orations, types of synagogue management and fundraising. I had to do a lot of grunt work, but eventually that turned into what he called equity, meaning he was giving me specific job responsibilities that most assistant and associate rabbis wouldn't have. He was gone a lot, and he deserved it, and he gave me the keys, and he always had confidence in me. Once Rachel and I had Lillian, we decided that living in San Diego and where we lived wasn't really the best place to rear a family. And during my time in Los Angeles and in San Diego, I met a dear friend named Billy Planer. He runs a Jewish nonprofit out of Atlanta called Edgar 36, where he takes Jewish kids throughout the country on civil rights trips. And I happened to be able to go on my first one when I was an intern in Pacific Palisades. The youth director resigned and the educator put me in the position, so I took 15 kids from Los Angeles, matched with other shuls. We went to Atlanta, we went to Selma, we met the Joanne Bland, I think I've seen her 4 times, Bishop Woods, and I loved it. And when I was in San Diego, we did that trip 3 times with my teams. And so when we were deciding to leave San Diego, it was a matter of going to synagogues in the New York area. And then David Frank said, Jonathan Miller had a strong rabbinate, and he used a consulting group called Evans Consulting, which I know some of you guys know that name. We were doing a campaign. And once he said those words, it was January of 2017, something sparked in my brain. And when Temple Emanu-El posted that position, a bunch of my mentors said, you should apply. Don't be myopic because it's Birmingham, Alabama. I know you've only been there a couple times. You've only seen Kelly Ingram Park. But go. Don't be so small in the way you see the world. The good news is that my wife is coming from University of Michigan Medical School, UCLA residency, and UAB, like it does today, and then had an incredibly strong reputation as a center of medical excellence. So she was, I have a lot of friends who went to UAB. And I remember I got an email from Joel Piasek. It was in early August, scheduling my first interview. And then Rachel and I came down for an interview. It was the first time she's ever left Lillian. I remember like it was yesterday. It was such a big deal. And then the rest is history. And so they did a great job of recruitment and interviewing, and here we are.
Yeah, right to present day.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious, I guess, you talked about, obviously, so you'd already had sort of the Southern Jewish experience in a way in Nashville, but how was Birmingham different?
There's not as many bachelor parties in Birmingham as in Nashville.
That's definitely true.
This is before Nashville became Nashville. It's hard to compare southern cities because Atlanta is a totally different Jewish community than is Birmingham, and Montgomery is a totally different Jewish community than to us. I think Birmingham is truly unique, and I'm going to say this proudly. There are a lot of bumps along the way, things I'm proud of, things I regret, but our rabbis teach us that there's another word for experiences, and those are called failures. So, but you learn from them. And when I came to Birmingham, I did not know the importance of a united Jewish community, Reform and conservative, Temple Emanu-El and Bethel, of collaboration, a wonderful relationship with Chabad. And I know this is being filmed, but I'm not afraid to say it. A lot of Reform and conservative rabbis, whether it's inferior or concerned about engagement with Chabad. Not me. I find our Chabad, Miriam, the rabbis, they're truly wonderful people. And then whenever I go there, I feel like I can be a congregant when I'm at Chabad. So I had to learn quickly of the importance of united Birmingham Jewish community, which makes us a little bit different than most communities across the country. I got an email from Bethel asking us to help promote their deli fundraiser, which we were absolutely proud to do so. That one happened in most communities. Most communities wouldn't combine our religious school. Most communities wouldn't have their Hebrew high school at a neutral location and have modern Orthodox and Chabad. So I love the fact that I'm a rabbi at Temple Emanu-El, but I'm also a rabbi in this community. It comes with significant, great responsibility, which I'm learning each and every day.
That's interesting, and that's interesting to sort of highlight that as something that's different too. And this is actually a good point, I think, to zoom out for a moment, because we have been looking at different denominations this season, and again, we have people listening who might not be Jewish or as familiar. So could you tell us just a little bit about what makes Reform Judaism unique, what characterizes it, and maybe specifically here too, because Reform Judaism is obviously not the same in every single place, as conservative and Orthodox aren't either.
Okay, so we're going to go back in a time machine when a little small person named Napoleon, when he emancipated the Jews. This was a really big deal, and he had something called the Napoleonic Code. But he lost in a very big battle in Leipzig, and all of a sudden, Jews who once were emancipated lost their citizenship. Jews who wanted to be professors, doctors, lawyers, not so fast. So Reform Judaism was born out of the idea of it having an enlightened religion. Israel Jacobson and Rabbi Abraham Geiger. And they wanted to separate the wheat from the chaff, not to focus on ceremonial and ritual obligations, but to be a prophetic Judaism that complements the religiosity of the German-speaking lands. And so what does that mean in normal sense? High bimas, black robes. It had to become an authentic religion in the German-speaking lands, because if we wanted to be part of German society, we had to stop praying for a separate nation. So that was the origins of Reform Judaism. And then came something called Positive Historical, which is conservative Judaism. And then Abraham Geiger's dear friend was a guy named Rabbi Hirsch, who was the father of modern Orthodox Judaism. So it all happened there. And then eventually by 1865, it was in America by Rabbi Weiss in Cincinnati. Some congregations were speaking in German at Reformed shuls. And even in Birmingham, many Jews in this area came here around 1850 when a lot of German peddlers came. So Birmingham has a strong German Reform tradition. Through the years, people called Reform Judaism Reformed with an ED. There's no ED. And we're in excommunication. Well, so is Chabad. I guess we're all in excommunication. But Reform Judaism was supposed to be a prophetic religion that focused more on making an informed choice as to how we understand Jewish law. Mm-hmm. That's the basis for it. If my congregants were to go to a prayer experience for rabbinical students in LA or New York or Jerusalem, you'd think we're all Orthodox. So it's very interesting. But the problem, there's always problems in any form of a movement. So in 1999, Rabbi Richard Levy of blessed memory, he was on the cover of Reform Judaism magazine. You guys can remember that. And it was wearing a tallis and a kippah. And it was almost a wow effect. In the 80s and 90s, we had the rise of Jewish summer camp with the infusion of more Hebrew. And so in a lot of these Jewish summer campers, they wanted to flirt more with tradition. And so in the early 2000s and up to today, a lot of Reformed congregations are more, how do I say this, reformative. Second day Yontif, doing more liturgy, more Hebrew in the service. I know when I came here, people talked about the more use of Hebrew. I still tell them we have like 14 English readings, and the response is it doesn't seem that way in television, but that's okay. So Reform Judaism is not about being less religious. It's about how do we understand Jewish law in our contemporary society. And at Temple Emanu-El, that's the way how I see it. We're not a halakhically obligated congregation, but I want all of our congregants or spiritual seekers to try to figure out as to how they want to have and build a Jewish home. We have congregants who don't keep kosher. We have some congregants who keep kosher. I know how I have a direct 12 o'clock shot at hell right now, but if you were to go into our kitchen at Temple Emanu-El, Hal, how many kitchens are in your kitchen? 2, because there was an intent behind it that one day it would be a kosher kitchen for the community. In San Diego, Rabbi David Frank, we had a kosher kitchen. And so, we've always flirted more with ritual and tradition. If I were to make a unilateral decision that I made the kitchen kosher, there would be a lot of phone calls to the president. But I want our congregants to explore the richness of the tradition. We send Lillian to our religious school. We also send Lillian to Torah time at Chabad because we think it's incredibly important for her to get both perspectives. I want Reform Jews to do the same. I know there's a lot of emphasis regarding social action in Reform Judaism. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of emphasis regarding social action in conservative, Orthodox, Reconstruction, renewal. Is that sometimes within each movement we get off the path, and sometimes we have to get back in that lane for God, Torah, and Israel.
Yeah, this is actually a good transition because we haven't talked about Israel yet, and I know that this is something you're passionate about, and I think I meant to ask you this earlier, but we kind of skipped over it. Could you talk about that development of that being sort of a passion of yours? I think when we first met, you had talked about going on your first trip and how important that was to you.
So my first time ever in Israel was my first year in Israel living for rabbinical school. It was absolutely awful, okay? Moses Mendelssohn, the great thinker of the 18th century, says, you don't appreciate home until you leave it. So I didn't go on Birthright. I didn't go on a congregational trip where you stay at nice hotels and watch Friends and have that fabulous breakfast in the morning and leave. My cousin Yudi, I have all these Orthodox cousins in Jerusalem. He picked out my apartment, which he thought was nice, in which my mom said was absolutely dreck, meaning awful. No air conditioning. It was on a basement in Rehavia off a main street, Derech Aza. I came from a strong academic background, and a lot of the students were like hippies and campers and Birkenstock wearing people, and I had a hard time relating. And it was my first time ever living, it was actually my first time ever outside the country. And when you're in Michigan, going to Canada doesn't count, okay? It was absolutely hard. I was 26 at the time. I missed my family, and I was eager to get back to the States. And so my Zionism was very elementary. I didn't understand the significance of the contemporary Jew, or as they say, the new Jew. We'd go to the Palmach Museum, which is the history of the Israeli military. I wasn't aware of certain street names. They have strong significance, the way museums are built. So I was studying and drinking a lot of Gold Star. That's the joke, okay? But something changed in 2014. There was another conflict with Gaza, and I started noticing the way Israel was portrayed in the media, mainstream media outlets, and it bothered me. And then eventually I'd get calls from parents in San Diego irate about the way Israel's being treated, whether or not they should send their kids on Birthright. There's things going around at college campuses which nobody's talking about. So right around 2014 and 2015, I like to say I had a theological experience, because I realized that Jews are indigenous to the land of Israel. Reform Judaism is a Zionistic religion that, in its code, encourages making Aliyah to move to Israel. We have Jews from Iraq, we have Jews from Morocco, Jews from Spain, Jews from India, Jews from England, Jews from Argentina. But there's one common language, and that's modern Hebrew. And so it's that moment my Israel advocacy and my Israel identity became substantially enhanced. 2016, I went on a foreign ministry trip sponsored through the Israeli Foreign Ministry. I met with different political parties. It was breathtaking. I learned so much. I got involved with APAC. I became a board member with the San Diego office with Stand With Us, an Israel education advocacy group. And then it became a core foundation in my life, even with Rachel too and my parents, that for Judaism to thrive in the diaspora, Israel had to be strong. And that's up to today. So believe it or not, by 2018, Rachel and I were having conversations about making the Aliyah to Israel. We had a few problems. One, I think my parents would have killed us because of taking Lillian to Israel. And two, it's hard getting resettled at this stage in our life. So we decided not to do it. But it's kept on building and building and building. And for those who have heard my sermons, some good, some bad, Israel is foundational to Jewish practice. You can't separate them. It's like Alabama and college football.
That's a metaphor everyone can understand here. So kind of coming off of that too, I'd love if you could talk about, some of the big things that you've worked on at Temple Emanu-El that you've been most passionate about. So that's one of them, and you've kind of hit on some others, but I'd love to give you space to kind of reflect on some of the meaningful things you've worked on during your time there.
I think the two most important things programmatically, I remember when I came, we got the data from Reimagine Jewish Birmingham about temple consolidation and Jewish agencies. Again, learning, ups and downs. I'm proud that we first got Kesher, a combined Hebrew high school program with all the members of the Jewish community at the day school. I'm proud that with over 300 years of shared history, that Temple Beth-El and Temple Emanu-El have a joint confirmation class. I felt that was a big win. And then this past year, for the first time, Temple Emanu-El and Temple Beth-El have a combined religious school. And I think for Birmingham Judaism to survive, we're going to start seeing, I don't like the word consolidating, I like partnership. You'll start seeing more partnership with the different synagogues for years to come. So I'm incredibly proud that we were able to get such a big thing done that our young families wanted to see. Second, we're able to get great staff to Temple, bringing in Canon Robbie Whitner from Washington Heights, New York, and his personality and what he brings to our congregation and that voice of his. I'm proud that we're able to have a great staff, and our staff's like our family. And through COVID and other adversities, our congregation continues to grow, and we're constantly reevaluating our imperfections in order to make a better Jewish product.
That's great. Well, we're coming close to time here, so I've got three sort of concluding questions for you that are getting more into the personal side of things.
Okay.
And one, this is kind of my last being a rabbi question. What is the hardest thing and what is the best thing about being a congregational rabbi?
I want to start with the best. When you show up for someone and you're able to comfort them, and I said this to Robbie, I said, at the end of the day, no one's going to care about your Avinu Malkeinu. It was composed by Janowski and Folk. But people are going to remember if you show up for them or don't show up for them during a time of need. And one of the greatest honors as a rabbi is when you do a funeral intake, or you visit someone in the hospital, and a 15-minute visit or an hour funeral intake can create a form of healing, can make all the difference in the world. Another great thing about being a congregational rabbi is sometimes we miss the mark. And here in Birmingham, I've noticed, especially the past 6 months, the willingness and compassion of our congregants to sit down with me and really give me good feedback about what they see out of Temple Emanu-El. And when I have these lunches or coffee meetings, call it active listening, owning it, you can have a way to make a difference in someone's life. So that's the best thing about being a congregational rabbi, is delivering on life cycles and the ability to listen better each and every day. The hardest thing about being a rabbi, and I'll say it at Temple Emanu-El, is a lot of our staff have young kids, and this is somewhat novel for Temple Emanu-El for many decades. And sometimes we can't be at every Jewish community event, and it's not my intention, but I miss a lot of time with my family. I understand in The Godfather, Chaim Roth said this is the business we chose to do. I get that completely, but there's certain things I wish I had more time spending with my family. I feel that I'm always on call, but that's part of the job. I triage things while on vacation, whenever I take it. But a lot of rabbis are burnt out now. A lot of rabbis are deciding to be underemployed, but there's nothing stopping me. I always want to be a congregational rabbi, despite the stress and anxiety that comes with the position.
It's actually the perfect transition to my next question, which is, I'd love if you could just talk a little bit about raising Jewish children in Birmingham, because you are a parent too.
I'm proud in the community which we live in Birmingham, that we are a substantial minority. Because in Michigan, I learned that you can take your Judaism for granted. Here, you got to live it. You got to live it. You got to be proud. You got to be active. And I want Lillian and Maisie and Teddy to be proud of their Jewishness, not in spite of it. And you can establish a formal Jewish home where everyone finds themselves. So something seems so natural to us because Rich and I both lived through a Torahic mindset of how we rear our kids. You know, what's in the home, Judaica, Shabbos, Israel. But just like her parents and my parents, we're not cutting corners for something secular. They're going to embrace Jewish life. And I can't believe I'm admitting this. Every Sunday, Lillian pitches a fit. She doesn't want to go to Sunday school. Okay? Same thing with Torah time. Okay? It's a miracle when she comes home, she had the best time ever. So it's just, we don't give in to the demands of secular society when it comes to sports and all that stuff.
Yeah, and to your point, I think a lot of people have talked about this on Southern Jewish Voices, you know, in a place like Birmingham that has to be really intentional, and there's a strength there in some ways.
Yeah, and I think eventually you're going to start seeing this across North America. I can't speak for Canada, but society has changed with the rise of smartphones, screen time. I mean, basketball, baseball, those sports used to be seasonal. Now, if you want to make it to the next level, you know, you have a coach who'll tell your family your kid has undiscoverable talent, okay? So I know that faith, when it's done well, makes families happier. And I was talking to my friends on Highland Avenue, their churches, and less people are going to the pews. But if you really think about it, my mom went to services every single Friday night at Temple Israel, Rabbi Fromm, a blessed memory, just like Rabbi Grafman, 45-minute orations. But before that or after that, what do you think they did? What do we do after service at Temple Emanu-El?
Rabbi would go to, Grafman would go to football games.
Football game, where we go to dinner. We would have mealtime. We would go to dinner, okay? And so in a church, when you go to church at Sunday, you're with your aunts, your cousins, and you'd go to lunch after. And table fellowship is the foundation of rearing a great family. But now people aren't doing that anymore because you got to play 15 baseball games in 2-hour span or a swim meet. And we're intentionally doing things that aren't good for us. So, religion's a beautiful thing. And if I can get more people to come, and I'll go off, Rhodes Scholars, the number one thing they have in common, family dinners.
Mm.
And here we have you go to Shabbat, you go to church, and you have a family dinner after. What a great on-ramp for better living.
Well, this is another almost perfect transition, the sports part.
Okay.
And this is actually the last question of the entire season, which is I'm going to give you a platform to tell us about why hockey is so important and what we're missing down here in the South. And I know, but they don't know.
We tell them who your first cousin is.
Well, I don't think they'll know.
Just
but
tell them. It's impressive.
I have
Impressive.
a few first cousins who are NHL players: Jack Hughes, Quentin Hughes, and Luke Hughes.
What was Jack drafted?
He was number 1. Yeah.
Yeah, he was a number 1 draft pick in the NHL.
And this was actually a fun fact. He was the first Jewish
Okay.
number 1.
Okay, that's a really big deal. Okay. By 1993, I became an avid Detroit Red Wings fan. They lost to Toronto at Game 7. I may have broken something. But Mike Ilitch, of blessed memory, who owned Little Caesars, established an ownership embodied by family. And the Red Wings were always there for me. My parents divorced in 1995. I came back. I had the Red Wings. I knew at 7:30 at night on Past Sports or Channel 13, it was going to be Mickey Redmond and Ken Daniels. I was going to have my hockey team. And they became my life. And I understand the connection to Alabama football, because your team, but the Red Wings are different for me. And okay, when we got married, Rachel surprised me. We took all of our photos at Julius Arena and center ice, because hockey, the teamwork, the speed of it, the family aspect, I loved every aspect. And you get in a fight with someone, you only get in trouble for 5 minutes. And
It does make it more exciting.
yeah, I mean, and there's a joke that hockey players have long memories, and they're always there for each other. And if someone were to watch hockey live versus football, there's no doubt in my mind they would say that watching hockey is a better sport watching live than football.
And so we're going to end on that controversial note, and I'll come bother him about it after this. And I'll just say, we'll work on getting Jack to the Red Wings.
Something? The Illich family has the money, not me, okay?
Thank you all so
Thank
much,
you so
and thank
much.
you, Adam.